are Squawking Dead, a podcast pulverizing episodes beyond the Walking Dead universe. Sometimes we give you news, sometimes make you laugh. Most times we go deep. I'm your host, David Cameo, and I'm joined by Cosmo Zero and I, Rachel Burt. Hello again. Sharon D, aka Blazy Gardner, and Bridget, aka Punky Brewster. ko-fi.com/Punky Brewster. That's PUNKYBRUISETER. And of course, Survivor Seer member, Takira. You can reach at ko-fi.com/Connie Dixon for life. That's Connie Dixon, the number 4 LYFE. Today we're here to talk about The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon's 4th episode, La Dame De Fer, which is the Iron Lady or Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
In the merch store, there is a Walking Dead Daryl Dixon logo t-shirt that's available for everybody to purchase. You can head to our website, squawkingdead.com, hit the main menu in the top left and tap merch. You can get it also in tie-dye or raspberry sherbet if you're into that sort of thing.
I'm very into both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, check them out. You may end up liking them. And it's probably on the screen right now if you're watching this on YouTube. Rachel said it best, though, when we were just getting on, and that it was a nice continuation from the last episode, which was Paris sera toujours Paris. And like Bridget said in the last episode, we were ramping up in the 3rd episode. And I think a lot happened in this episode. And as usual, as it pertains to episodes where a lot happens, my notes aren't as big as they were in the last episode because of the slow points and all the different references. However, just like the last episode, there were some interesting little nuggets that seem so insignificant until you really look into it.
It was one of my favorites and one that made me the most sad all at the same time. Why is everybody separate? I hate it when that happens. I hate it when it happens on every show. And I'm sad that we may not see Sylvie again because y'all know that's my girl. But the story is moving forward. We have some action. We had that weird little moment with a hug between Daryl and Izzy. I think it might be the best spinoff, actually.
You'd posted that critics are kind of liking this a lot more than even the latter seasons of The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys think the same, but I think a lot of that has to do with a concerted effort from fans to kind of raise the Rotten Tomatoes score and raise the IMDb score too, if I'm not mistaken, just to kind of like flood it with positive feedback. Because most people like flood things with negative feedback.
Negative, yeah.
Most of the time. So places like Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, anything where you can rate anything, they kind of balance the negative feedback with the positive feedback. So the positive has more weight to it. So much negative feedback basically tank a business. Mm-hmm. But if you weight the positive feedback, well then, okay, the business is saved.
Found especially in the hospitality industry, people are way more likely to complain about something than they are to praise for something. People will raise hell online about a small mistake, but they're not going to go online and say this was the best place I've ever been and these people did this.
There's an old statistic about that in the restaurant industry. Managers would always say, if something goes wrong, a person is most likely to share that negative feedback with 10 people. This is before the days of the internet, so more than 10, but they're going to tell 10 people. If they're happy, you're lucky if they're going to tell one person.
Right. Also, they don't want them to eat at the same restaurant as them. Ugh, my friend, this is my place. You ever hear people that do that? I don't want people to find out about. Oh, this is my place. My ex-girlfriend? No, thank you. It's why you don't take like your first few dates to like the restaurant you really like, because then you're like, what if you don't like them? It's like, I don't know. I don't want to see her there again.
I'm mostly feeling confused. Hopefully we can hash a lot of that out while we talk today.
Do you think some of that has to do with what I'd said in the last episode, which was that last episode did feel like it at some points kind of was all over the place? It was slow at some points, and then all of a sudden, wait, now Cadron's people are, what happened? Do you feel like this episode was the same though?
I'm going to have to say yes, because I can't remember what happened in the separate episodes. It's just all one big blob in my brain. So
fair. Sometimes when things are too slow, you're like, come on, let's move it already.
Honestly, I am getting to that point where I'm like, all right, what's going to happen here? I wanted a few more answers this episode, and maybe we got some, but they weren't the answers I wanted, and I need something to happen now.
Is it that you feel like maybe we're ramping up to something that we're not going to like?
Yeah.
Or conclusion that we're not going to get?
I'm getting that like Padre feeling. We got this huge buildup for Padre, and then we were like,
So more Padre, less Dead City, in a sense.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. That's a temperature reading.
There's a lot of pressure for Laurent to be something super special. And I just don't want, I'm where Bridget is, right? Like, this kid can't be the cure. Like, I don't want him to be the cure. Like, we can't fix shit. Like, we're beyond fixing shit.
That
so,
opening scene, by the way, like, I thought of Bridget immediately, like, I don't know if she's gonna, okay, it's a dream. Thank God.
I'll go over my reaction to that later.
You know who's gonna get the complaints? It's me. It's like, and all of you.
I'm not going to say it was one of my favorites, and I don't know if that's just because I'm in the headspace I'm in right now. I'm not sure, but there was just something about this episode that didn't really grab me. It was enjoyable to watch, and I liked the action scenes and the fact that I stayed up till 3 o'clock to watch it, and it wasn't
there.
On AMC again at 3 o'clock in the morning. Thank you very much, AMC.
It wasn't on AMC proper, too, which is...
Yeah, right. So
it happens, but not as much as like Amazon Prime or anywhere else. YouTube TV.
Maybe it's because this episode felt more like a Walking Dead proper episode than a Daryl Dixon episode to me.
And most people would regard that as a good thing, I think. But
right?
I'm not saying I didn't like it. I'm just saying it didn't grab me as much as the other episodes have.
I guess I meant more a positive thing. But I think I know what you mean, because
so like
there's something about it.
Right. So like the scene where he's at the Eiffel Tower and there's this huge mob of walkers behind a wall, and they all manage just at this very time to push out from behind this wall and attack this kid. And it's the same thing we've seen over and over. I feel like the Daryl Dixon show has been very good at presenting us new situations, whereas this was very much just feeling like the same old to me. Again, I am in a very weird headspace this week.
Was I the only one that felt like they moved because there were variants in there?
I didn't even see any variants. And all these years that they've had these walkers pinned behind this barricade, nobody has ever walked up here. Because Laurent wasn't even making that much noise. It's not like he was screaming or banging things or anything like that. He was just walking there. And then all of a sudden, like, all these walkers come out, like, just at this very propitious time.
I did kind of write that down, too.
Contrived. And there were a couple other times, like, Daryl, not things that he wouldn't have done. I can't remember what it was. It was something towards the beginning. And he didn't kill somebody or left a weapon laying there or something. I'm like, Daryl would not do that. He's smarter than that.
Would a regular walker bend down and look through a hole?
If they thought a thing was in there, like a rat or a human, maybe. Yeah.
Predominantly, we've just seen them get down on their knees, but I didn't think of it as like a variant thing.
Because of the way that walker made me feel like it was a variant, I was like watching closely, and I just did feel like there were variants mixed in. I felt like the sense of something being out there to the variants is kind of what set off the like domino effect of all the walkers coming out.
Well, especially after the last episode too. We got the burners, we had the experiment walker, and then I could see why you'd think that too. And especially if this episode feels like a continuation of the last, maybe that theme will continue. And maybe that is another reason, because we didn't really objectively see one. Maybe that's another reason why people are like, more variants. I didn't get it.
I think the closest to variants we saw was the orchestra.
That's a very, you know what? I wouldn't say technically, but I would say very unique. Just going back to what you said about the one that was the walker that was bending down to get Laurent. Maybe this is something, because oftentimes when we see hordes of walkers or even a few walkers, it's not often that we get a dead on walker looking into the camera. And I think a lot of that has to do with...
We've seen it happen though.
It's like a once in a while sort of thing. Like, okay, maybe several episodes, or I don't know, maybe a whole season will go by before you get like a dead on looking at the camera walker. And usually that's very, very intentional. But most of the time you don't, because I think a lot of it has to do with the makeup department, and you don't want to spend too much time looking at these walkers, because then the people watching the show might think, oh, they might not get the feeling that they're real. But then you spend a little extra time on that one walker with the right contact lenses, and effectively the walker is looking straight into Laurent's face, which is you, the audience. So maybe that gives you that feeling of dread. And is this a variant? And
I don't know. I just felt there was like a little more intent behind it bending and looking through that little hole than a regular walker would have.
Well, yeah, its intent was to jump scare you. It worked.
Yeah, it's a moassa. It's moassa. It's make walkers scary again.
Oh, gosh.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the walkers in France seem to me to be a little bit more aggressive than regular walkers in America anyway.
Is it because you don't speak the language? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Excusez-moi, mademoiselle. I'm trying to speak French, Walker.
Oh, growl, growl.
Is that like Basque? Some people say it is. Anyway, whatever. Okay. It's a very intellectual joke. Okay, so let's move on to Bridget. Let's move very fast on to Bridget.
Hi. It was pretty good.
You said the last one was your favorite, right?
I think the last one was my favorite. It was good. Something felt a little flat about it, but I think it has to do with I really don't like Quinn.
I love to not like him.
I know that's the intention. It's working because I just really strongly dislike him. I don't handle the dad thing well, having had my own dad issues. It just makes me uncomfortable.
Okay, it's mixing two themes that together are terrible, which is like the abusive ex-boyfriend and the
negligent father.
Less negligent, but more like using your kid as a prop. Essentially, it's unclear whether he really cares about Laurent, really. But still, he's using him as a prop.
It's hard. I've been through both. This guy is just a representation of a lot of things I don't love.
He's cream of the crap.
Yeah, there's a lot here that I just don't care for. So I think that has something to do with it. I don't know what the intention is with Isabelle and Daryl, but if they're trying
what do you mean by that?
If they're trying to force a relationship in this, it just kind of skeeves me out a little. I don't know. Something about it just really bothers me. You know, I'm a big advocate for like, just because people are of opposing genders and on a show together, like does not mean that they need to be a couple. I continually say it's okay for people to just be friends because there's not enough of that like in our world sometimes. I think it's okay for people to be friends and care about each other. I'm not saying like everybody should walk down the street holding hands because that could get maybe a little bit confusing for people. It's okay for me to like be around women that I love, that I'm not sexually attracted to because I'm sexually attracted to men, but it's okay for me to be around them and hug them or kiss them on the cheek. And like, that doesn't have to be like, oh, she's interested. You see that?
You think she wants me?
It's the same thing with guys. Gross. Like when I hang out with guys, we can joke around and I can like nudge you with an elbow. And like, that doesn't mean that I'm like trying to get in your pants. And that just really bothers me that we just make those assumptions all the time.
The second episode when they met the kids and we were talking about how these kids have probably never had a super positive male role model in their world lately, and B, they've been told that men are dangerous because in this world they are super dangerous. So maybe what people are misconstruing as romantic intentions is actually just the fact that obviously Isabelle has not known very many nice men either. Her previous life was not conducive to her having a lot of nice male friends. Yeah. And she also has been living in this world where men are extremely dangerous. So maybe it's the idea that she's actually met a guy who's actually good and actually nice. So it's more like a friendship infatuation than a romantic infatuation. I don't see romance in Daryl's end at all. And what people are saying is Izzy's romantic intentions toward him, I think might just be, again, friendship infatuation, that she's found a guy who is actually a nice guy and she doesn't have to be afraid of him, and he's not going to try to literally and figuratively f*** her.
Excuse me? Foul language.
I think that's a really nice thought to have about that, because have you ever met someone that you like want to be friends with? Like you don't really know them, but something about them is special in some way that you're like, I want to be friends with that person. Why am I getting emotional? And I could see this being that she wants to be close to him because he's such a good person, and she doesn't know very many good people who are just good just for the sake of being good. Because even though she lived in a world where like people believed in being good in terms of like religion and God, that can have ulterior motives. It's not always the intention, but it's referred to in faith as good works. Good works are intended to be things that you do that are fruits of the faith or fruits of the Spirit, which means that the Holy Spirit is living in you and that you, as a result, want to do good things because God has done so much good in your life by sending a savior, etc. Like that's where this comes from. So when we talk about good works, that's what that's meant to be. But a lot of the time, good works get twisted into like, if I do enough good on earth, then I should be granted salvation. And that's not Christianity's viewpoint. Christianity's viewpoint is you don't have to do anything to earn this salvation. The salvation has been given to you freely. So I think even in a religious capacity, those good things can be viewed as like, maybe they're doing it from the bottom of their heart because they feel compelled to do good, or maybe it's because they feel like this will get them into heaven. I do kind of like this idea of like him being like,
well, bringing it back to Isabelle, you feel like maybe that's her basis for the care and attention that she's giving to Daryl.
I feel like Daryl has made it pretty clear that he's not a religious person. He's not doing it because he thinks he's going to go to heaven for it.
That's what I was trying to say, Sharon. There's no question about his motives. His motives are altruistic in nature.
He is using them to get to the port, supposedly. But
that was his initial intention.
Right. There's several times that he could have been like, nah, fuck this, and ditched them when they were caught up with the kid. Anytime he could have left and just been like, forget it. I know I can follow my own way.
Well, even the thing with Quinn, where he's like, no, I don't need a boat this bad. No boat is worth this. He's giving up his chance at going back to his family and being with the people that he cares about for people he doesn't really know.
But knows enough to not allow good people enough to know that they're good people to fall to the clutches of the devil.
But I know, I just like that idea. I think Charity, that's a really good perspective to have. It makes me feel a little bit better about the whole situation.
I'm not against them having a relationship, but I don't see it happening. I just do not see any indication from Daryl whatsoever that he has romantic intentions in any way, shape, or form.
I'm surprised that a lot of the perspective we've been taking, I'm not actually surprised that we've been looking at it from Isabelle's point of view, but we didn't really look at it a lot from Daryl's point of view. And as Sharon was talking earlier, I had been thinking about Daryl's point of view and Daryl's perspective and who the people Daryl grew up with. And it was mostly male figures. His father, smoking, drinking, abusive. His brother, Merle. We don't really get to hear a lot about his mom. I know a single or maybe two references ever on the show, on any of the shows.
Story about when she died because she fell asleep on the couch with a cigarette.
But you don't really hear about what she was like necessarily.
Well, I always assumed because of the stories he tells about his dad, Carol is representative of a lot of that for him.
As an avatar or of an actual?
That's why they have such a connection, because his mother was abused by his father. We could gather that from the stories that Daryl has told about his dad. His dad's not a good guy. Daryl doesn't white knight anybody. He doesn't come in and say like, I'll take care of this for you. Shane does that with Carol. Shane did that, right? But Daryl does not, because Daryl knows that you are capable of strength, but you have to make the choice to use it. I'm sure he loved his mother, because we all love the people that we grow up with, whether or not they're great people. Right. You still have some feeling of love towards them.
He probably loved his dad too, in a weird way, right?
In a way,
I mean, he kind of always will, but
but it's the same thing with Isabelle. Like he's not trying to white knight the situation, but he is trying to say like, you don't have to go back to him. Like, you were able to get away from him. Why would you strip all of that strength away going back? But she views it as that she has to, because she's trying to protect Laurent. Carol is very similar to his mother, and so is Isabelle now in the same regard. I had a therapist once that said cyclical melodrama. I fired this therapist, just so you guys know, because this was not great. What I heard was not great. So she essentially told me
the one thing she heard was a dead on.
No, I went and when I was telling her about how like I'd been in an abusive relationship and I had finally gotten out of it, and this was really raw. I had just left it. I was only a couple months free of this guy. It was before I met Travis even. She said that I was destined to play out this melodrama for the rest of my life because of the relationship that my father and mother had had. And so I quit her that day because I was like, that's horrible advice. There was no talk about like breaking that cycle or anything, just that I was destined to fulfill this over and over again.
My job is to give you an oar so that you can navigate this destiny.
Big F you, because guess what? I'm not living out that melodrama now.
Good for you, number one. But that kind of goes back to the circular theme from the last week, with the records and the going around with the apocalypse over and over again. Even though this was referencing you, we're still talking about Daryl and his cycle. And I think he's been able to break the cycle. Yeah. It took an apocalypse to do it, because had the apocalypse not happened, Daryl would have gone down that same exact road as Merle and his father.
Sometimes you need a a catalyst.
Right. We were also talking last week about how Isabelle got more from the apocalypse. It benefited her in the same way because she would have kept doing the same cycle over and over again.
Yes.
And the apocalypse broke it for her too.
So
and she says as much.
But that's where I don't really agree.
That's what I was trying to get at, Dave, was like, that's what the cyclical melodrama is like Daryl does tend to engage with people who are living out the same traumas that he's gone through. It's the same thing anybody who goes through trauma does. It's unintentional. How do we find each other? I have no idea. I believe in divine intervention. So to me, that's what it is. Being put on a path to like engage with these people who have also been through very similar life events. Like he went all the way to France and he still ends up with someone who is struggling with the same kind of dynamic that Carol struggled with. So early on, Ed died. She didn't have to deal with the repercussions of leaving him.
Maybe that was what drew him to Leah, because Leah's trauma any trauma that she had, we knew about happened after the apocalypse, right? So maybe she was one of those people that wasn't in that kind of cycle, and that was what drew him to her on a romantic level.
Yeah.
They had that, and they also had this interesting connection to grief and loss. Well, Daryl wasn't ready to give up the search for Rick, but eventually Leah kind of got him to, hey, you've been mourning and searching. Like you've been this simultaneous thing. And she's just been mourning until he came around and shook things up for her. She shook things up for him. And people keep shaking things all. Anyway, but a lot of shaking going on.
And they had a dog to bond over. That's the best bonding.
That's
the best bonding.
That's a great pivot right there. Because bringing it back to Isabelle and her cycle, I contend that I don't think she's ever broken the cycle. There were opportunities to, but she continues to place a burden on herself. It is a negative for her, but one of those burdens is God. She became codependent with another being.
What if the cycle breaker is a child? Because what broke the cycle for Daryl maybe was Judith.
It's fine.
Right? And what's breaking this, what could have broken the cycle for Isabelle is Laurent, but she's passing up that opportunity to go back to what she was doing. She says she's doing it for Laurent, but is she? Or does she just not want the responsibility anymore? That's
ultimately what I was going to lead to, is that, and I think the audience wants this as well, for everything she's been through, taking care of Lily after their parents died, taking care of her child after she dies. I'm going to say this, and it's not going to come out probably 100% right, and because you're not going to want to agree with me, but being subservient or codependent on a higher power, let's say, or choosing another master, let's say, and I'm sure there's tons and tons of rewards to having that master. But there's a subservience element to it too. Serving God, placing burdens upon yourself. And then going back to Quinn. She's ready. I feel like this sacrifice and martyrdom, that's her superpower. She excels in it. She knows how to play that game. But going to your point, Sharon, I think all of this has to bear fruit. And it might not. And maybe it's a tragic story all along. I don't know. But everybody wants to know that the burdens they bear and the sacrifices they make, they have to mean something. And maybe Laurent is that something ultimately right now, because she's away from him and she has to let him go, or she feels like she has to let him go. We could talk about that a little bit more later, but I feel like right now, I don't see it yet, but I hope I see it personally. I hope that all that sacrifice was for him and that he in turn will save not the human race. He saves her. He lifts her burdens ultimately. And I think that's a great story. I like that story. All along, you see that she has been the one to bear the burdens. And now he's like saying to her, well, put it down. Let's be happy. Can we just live a life together, just as people who love each other? And maybe that can be possible after all this is done. Or at least this first season. I don't know what happens in the second season, which was filmed back to back.
I'm feeling very
confused.
Wah, wah.
Who cares?
Is that it?
Does it involve Daryl? Otherwise, I don't care.
I feel like an asshole feeling like that, but
it's a perspective.
It's beautiful, but if that's really how it ends, I'd be like, ugh, really?
Every ending has multiple facets, right? Well, and I also kind of wanted to take it back to what I was trying to say about Daryl, is that just like some people like me, I was surrounded by women all my life. I don't often talk about my dad not being around. I'm not saying like he was an absentee father, but in a way he was out before I left for school and he didn't come back until I was asleep constantly growing up. And so I was surrounded by my sister Gila, my sister Adina, for the longest time until my brother Ike was born when I was 11. And then my mom, constantly, teachers, women, predominantly. I don't think there's an exception. So when like you were saying, Bridget, in the second episode, when a male figure comes around that you can bond with, like I have like two cousins in my life, and they're older, obviously, so that makes it even better, who I really like have found kinship with. You just glom on. But going back to Daryl, these female figures are that for him. I see a lot of that relationship with Carol in Isabelle, which is kind of why I said, oh, they're bitching at each other like brother and sister. So I'm a bit of ambivalent again on the love thing, but I'm starting to move in the direction of more of the Carol situation, less of that I know I have the goods on you and I've seen your feet, so I don't want you. Less of that than it is more the, like you said, Bridget, guy and a girl can be, who are attracted to the opposite sex, don't have to be hooked together in a relationship. You know what? I can see that in this relationship. If it goes the other way, you know what? I saw things that could be interpreted in that way, but what has been said on the surface and what really kind of feels where things are going, I think they're doing this on purpose. Of course.
I don't know.
They're following that same formula.
I don't know, but I'm sorry that I brought this up because this was a really long tangent to say that I don't want this to happen. And it's not like I'm like actively like, I hate this. I'm just like, can we just not? Can we just leave it as a nice friendship? Can we just please do that? Because I just think that's a really important concept, especially this is like such a soapboxy thing to say, but as a young girl seeing a lot of that kind of garbage on television about how you like, if you had a male friend, then it, like, I was already boy crazy because I was already insecure in relationships with men. And then being told by like any form of media that, well, you should find a man and be with a man and you should like boys. And it just became like this whole thing. Like, so can we just like not? That's all.
Whether they're going to be in a romantic thing or not, they are purposely pointing our brains in the direction of something brewing between them. The more I see them together, the less they like each other. And in this episode, whatever the wall it was that they were trying to build between each other kind of got broken down, not in a way of like, oh my God, I'm so in love with you. Isabelle was standing there lost and confused, and you could see the hopelessness coming and the panic. And she turned around and saw Daryl, and I could see like the relief kind of flood out of her, which I didn't think Daryl was a person that would cause that kind of reaction from her because they don't know each other. And then how Daryl still kind of had the wall up and then relaxed a little bit. Okay, so they're realizing that they do care about one another.
But in the way Bridget describes, it's the more...
But then when
they're
you go,
dependent on each other.
Right.
They're relying on each other.
But then when you go later to the conversation with Sylvie, they do want us to think, whether it's one or the other or both, they do want us to think, oh, maybe there's something brewing.
It just seemed really pointed in this episode. Sylvie asks her, have you had any interest in anyone since taking your vow? Have you even like sexually attracted to anyone? And she says no. And she goes, even Daryl? I saw the way you were looking at him.
Even Sylvie sees it.
And she's like, no, that was a look of concern for Laurent, and for him, it's not that. So she tries to say it, but you're almost like, are you trying to convince yourself or
okay,
or
I see
what?
what you're saying. That's what you mean.
But that's why I was so
like, don't do it.
It's interesting because I think that could also mean, in a way, I'm relieved for myself. Everybody does it, but they don't know it. Sometimes when the people you love are okay, a little bit of that is, well, I'm glad I don't have to let them go and I don't have to see them suffering. Or like you were saying to Kira, when she sees Daryl, she breathes a sigh of relief. She's lost. Think of the interrogation that occurred of Armand earlier. She didn't know what to do. She was acting like she knew what she could do and reasoning with him and all that stuff. But Daryl really took control of that situation and things happened and she would not have been able to do that. And this is just the obvious example. But when she sees Daryl again, safe and okay, part of that also is, of course, Laurent. But like Daryl in particular and hugging him, I don't know what I'd do without you. Or I don't know what I could have done without you up until this point.
I was going to say, even if
like a protector is safe. Yeah, let's say
even if it's the time being, I don't know what I'm going to do without you.
Right, exactly. And of course, that pointed question really was for the audience.
Yeah,
wasn't it to kind of tell the audience, no, I'm not interested in Daryl. Okay, calm down, audience. This ain't happening.
I told you, like they're thirsty.
Like Maggie and Egan.
They're so thirsty.
And of course, nobody believes it. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
I don't think I said it out loud, but
That's
in
the show.
previous episodes, I was thinking, well, one thing that Isabelle doesn't know about Daryl is that he tortures people, because we were talking about how like he was looking at her with the drugs and her thing. When she couldn't get information out of this guy, I was like, oh, she's about to find out.
Armand done fucked around. And then he found out.
Yep. I do have a question about this scene.
With Armand and the torturing.
Yeah, when Daryl's doing that pacing thing, grabbing weapons and then like putting back and switching them out, and like that's a torture tactic because you're building. It's not anticipation, but you're building suspense to what's going to happen.
You don't know what's
going to
happen.
So I get where that comes from. I thought about it and I was like, we forgot in the show that like Daryl isn't this soft all the time.
He's
softened over time.
Or we've seen his soft side mostly.
Right.
Yeah, we haven't seen a torture scene in a while, but he was always the torturer, like almost always. It was like his thing. When he was going to do that, I was like, at first I was like, this is out of character for Daryl. And then I was like, wait, no, it's not. This is like prime Daryl right here. This is exactly who he is. It like brings us full circle to like, oh yeah, this is still Daryl, because I've seen a lot of feedback online about how this isn't Daryl, like this isn't Daryl, the Daryl that we're seeing. It has been. It's just that it's very much that soft side of him, but we've seen that before. It's not unusual. He has a soft side. We just haven't seen a ton of this other side
lately.
So it was easy to forget. So I'm glad that we saw that, but my question is about the story.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that really about him? Because that's what I was thinking when he's telling it.
Daryl is Jimmy.
But then Daryl does do that thing where he's like, no, I made all that shit up. And I was like, is this a moment of like levity and humor? No, that's not me. Or was it really him? Because he's gone through some pretty horrible stuff. This doesn't sound out of the realm of possibility for something his dad would have done to him.
I totally think it's his story.
I think it's his story too, because of the small detail where he mentioned his brother. Said, you kill the pig or I kill your brother.
Or it could have been about Merle.
hurt your brother. It could have been Merle's story.
Merle. It could have been Merle.
Maybe Merle was Jimmy.
It doesn't make it any less messed up.
Merle tried to murder the pig,
not at all.
but he didn't succeed because Daryl couldn't bring himself to it. You know me, I try to overthink everything because that's the show also. And
okay, well, at the end of the day, you know what? No one ever with Jimmy anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
The pacing thing, I thought also was a tactic to get Armand to look at him rather than the way he was looking at Isabelle, especially after he's saying she's a dirty girl, and I'm like, like just like Quinn, I'm like, but like on the more overt level. Oh, this guy's gonna get it, and I hope he does. In a way, I'm not that kind of person, but you know, whatever. It's a fictional television show, so why not? But that was a way for him to kind of stop looking at you. Look at me because I might do something crazy right now. Remember the crazy bitch face? I
actually think that what Armand was saying to Isabelle, it tore her down enough to make this decision to go back to Quinn. That's genuinely what I think. And
you know what? Afterwards, she does say to him, I have something to tell you. And he says, tell me after the river. That was the thing. It would have been a little easier had she just everything, like Falou didn't have to make a distraction and Daryl didn't have to slip through the back door. And if she just went back, I think
Daryl probably knew that. Daryl is very perceptive.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me. He knew what was going on there. He didn't know exactly the details, but he knew that what he was saying wasn't good.
I felt like even though he does not speak French, that he like knew what this guy was saying to her.
Well,
and he did say some English enough to say.
And then he does that thing where he goes to spit on her, but he stops and pauses and spits on the ground. Part of that's almost like, you're not even worth this to me.
Spit.
But some of it is, I think there was some fear of Quinn or some respect. I use that term very loosely for Quinn. And then out of that, he does not actively spit on her.
I'm glad he didn't, because then Daryl would have had no help getting to the place, because you know he would have killed him right then and there.
Not this being scene specifically, but since we've kind of been dancing around it, this was one of the moments where I was like confused. And maybe I missed something. I don't understand why Isabelle felt like she needed to go back to Quinn. Like, they already had Laurent. They were going to get on the boat. They were going to go continue their mission. And she's like, nah, I'm going to go back. Why?
So the fact that this guy says all this stuff about her Everybody wants to party with old Izzy.
Everybody of his crews know about her.
This is how you are. You're good for nothing. I think some of that has to do with it. It broke her down to like where she was when she agreed to do this kind of stupid stuff in the first place. I have a lot of fears going back to Milwaukee because that's where I was in a really bad relationship for a long time. When I go back, I have these fears of running into people that I used to know because I fear that they'll have that same viewpoint of me. For some reason, them having that same viewpoint of me, even though it doesn't matter and I don't care about those people, and why would I even care about what they think? That somehow in your mind does away with all of the progress that you've made.
It's that idea that this is the way they have seen me, and this is the way they will always see me,
and
no matter
this,
what I say or do.
So she's trying to lean into that. To me, that seems like more of a reason to leave.
So I thought that she went back to Quinn to get him to remove the guards from the river or whatever so they could get out of the river. Because she's like, I'm the only one that can make him do it. That was my take on it.
Sorry, this is my roundabout way of getting there. So I wanted to say that that's the scene in which she made up her mind about it. You kind of want to confront your abuser, but you also don't want to confront them because it tears you back down to the person that you were before. But like, you can only truly find strength by confronting them and saying like, you don't have power over me anymore. So I think there's some self-motivation there. Obviously, her main motivation is Laurent. And she knows that if she can get in with Quinn again, he's chasing her ultimately. He doesn't care about Laurent. He had Laurent. He let him go. He didn't let him go, but he would have given him away. Really. He doesn't care about Laurent.
Right. He was just a pawn.
So
maybe.
He ultimately wanted Isabelle to come back to him. If she does, she knows like, well, then hopefully I'll have power in this dynamic shift of me coming back that I can get him to help Laurent leave. I don't know that that's going to work. I think it's going to backfire.
It does go to what Janae says about Quinn and that he's a transactional man. And it's quite possible that Isabelle knows that's true too. And this got me to thinking a little bit more about Quinn as a person and how there are people in this world that don't know how to love freely. We've seen them before. Some of these people we've had in our lives. I'll speak for myself. The abusive ex-girlfriend that doesn't know how to encourage you to stay when you need to leave or when you have to leave or when it's just time to go home, and instead does that passive aggressive, again, I'm just talking about myself and maybe this is some of your experience, does that passive aggressive thing of saying something to the effect of, well, I guess you didn't really love me to begin with. But they have to do that because it's the only way they feel like they can get the love is to manipulate you into giving it, that sort of thing. But on Quinn's level, it's a bigger game. I love you, but in order for me to love you, this is the game we have to play. These are the terms, which is what he said in the last episode. I mean, he's ready to throw away Anna, by the way. Just want to make that clear.
I don't think he loves Izzy at all. I don't think there's love involved there. I think that's control. Too. Control and revenge because she dumped him and left him to die in the apocalypse. And now he has the chance to reclaim and own her again. I don't think there's love unless he has some twisted, messed up version of love in his head. Maybe he thinks he is.
I was going to say, I don't think people like that know how to love. So this is love to them.
It's not that easy for us to understand that, whatever that is that's causing that. But I've known people that's how they feel like they need to be.
I agree,
in order to have somebody to love.
Yeah. I think a big issue I have with this whole thing is we know it's going to go badly and Daryl's just going to have to come back and like do something about it. And I guess I'm just like, I don't know.
I hope not.
Feels too predictable.
Well, how would he know?
Because he met Quinn. He knows he's an ass bag. So.
And he definitely was relishing and wanting to finally give the beat down to him during that confrontation.
That is true to Daryl's nature to go back. It's not white knighting, but he doesn't feel like she deserves to be in that position.
Yeah.
And it's not going back to save her. It's going back to stop Quinn more than save her, maybe. I guess you'd call her the catalyst to it, the catalyst to the situation.
You think he would risk Laurent for her?
I think he'll see Laurent to where he needs to go and then go back.
Okay.
I hope not. I hope she's able to save herself. I think that would be really powerful.
Me too. But I think
that's what's going to happen.
He could come back and she could have saved herself by the time he gets there. It's not, he'll still end up going back, but it may end up that she's already saved herself before it goes down. I just wanted to point out that the boatman, his name is Aslan.
I love that.
Aslan.
I loved it so much.
Yes. A means lion,
In Arabic.
And B, if you have watched or read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the lion's name is Aslan. And Aslan was the allegory for Jesus, yes.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
It ties all into the
Skip to
anyway.
the end on that one.
When they said Aslan, I was like, wait a minute, that's really blatant.
I enjoyed it, but I really loved the Chronicles of Narnia.
The what goals of Narnia? No, sorry.
Anyway, yeah. No, I know a couple Aslans in my life too. So, and it's a very, very regal name.
It is a regal name. I like it.
So, and my feeling is that Aslan is going to be Laurent's protector here for a while. Why else would they make his name so prominent? I'm just saying, like that's foreshadowing of a.
I'm gonna say this out loud. I'm not gay, but if Aslan was my protector, I'm not mad at it. He has a hunk of meat that I could dig into.
He was an attractive man.
He was a very attractive man.
Oh,
no shade. It's seriously
our poor pigeon man. I'm so sorry.
Antoine,
our poor pigeon guy. If it's gonna happen, setting his pigeons free and watching them fly away before he dies is the best way to go.
I love the way he says goodbye to them. He says adieu camarade, adieu comrades, like goodbye.
Yeah,
my friends.
Bye friends. Yep.
Yeah. Two
I'm
times.
not gonna lie, that made me cry.
Yeah,
that was really
very
sad.
Guys, Daryl learned French.
Bon appetit.
Bon appetit.
Bon appetit.
You know what's so funny? I knew in that moment, knowing that you'd be coming on, that in that moment, I'm like laughing because Takira's going to bring this up later. And also, by the way, and also the sheer amount of F-bombs from everybody this episode.
Yes!
Tons of F-bombs.
But who did I think of first? Takira. She loves the F-bomb. I just
love it.
You know?
I loved watching Quinn get the shit beat out of him. It was just amazing.
Excuse me? Foul language. Disgusting. Okay.
So the title of this was The Iron Lady, and when you said that at the beginning of the show,
the Iron Maiden.
No, actually, what it made me think of was the Statue of Liberty that was on the bridge.
But that was copper. Ugh, ew. Anyway, sorry.
But is it in France? Is it in France copper? I don't know because I've never seen that one.
Yeah.
But that was
for
that
sure.
was what it made me think of. There's
another one in Japan too, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. The other thing it made me think of was Genet.
So I love you so much because there's a distinct feeling that basically almost everybody in this episode is a Dame De Fer. Anna Valeri. I saw some of that in her. Genet, a little bit, but Isabelle for sure. Anna Valeri for sure. The presence of strong women.
I'm not sure how it would tie in, but Margaret Thatcher was also known as the Iron Lady.
She was.
That was her nickname.
I didn't know that, even though I know a little bit about Margaret Thatcher.
There's like a movie, I thought, of the same name.
There's a movie called The Iron Lady about her with Meryl Streep. Good movie, by the way.
La Dame De Fer is what is often referenced as the Eiffel Tower, just so everybody knows. Do you know why they call it the Iron Lady? Oh, well, I'm about to tell you then.
Oh, okay.
The bottom of the Eiffel Tower does look like a woman's skirt. So it's hiding the legs of the tower. That's what. So it has this curve down. Yeah.
A feminine shape. I got you.
Okay.
Yeah. We all like
even
it,
though it's okay. Got it.
It's the French. It's
very,
the French,
very
Rachel.
phallic, but okay.
Don't overthink it. That's fine. I wanted to say this earlier when we were talking about her decision to go back. Less when we were talking about Rachel's confusion, but more when I think we were just talking about feelings, Daryl and Isabelle. And anyway, so what I was thinking was, had it occurred to any of you, and maybe especially like Bridget, that in a weird sense, being a nun was her way of achieving a sense of sobriety, coming clean. And part of that routine is some people feel like, and I think most people encourage that you don't go to places where there will be alcohol present. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, what is the most effective way to sober up? But it's like shooting a rocket at a bullseye, but it's a nunnery or like a convent.
Wouldn't there be wine?
Well, I don't know if they're doing the sacrament. Either way.
Were they growing grapes?
Right. So for her lifestyle
I know
choice,
plenty of nuns that drink.
That's true. Especially in the Midwest for some reason.
I like the idea of temperance and the constant presence of the Lord watching you. But being of somebody who was of that life, they would probably make a more concerted effort to not, because it's dangerous for them to follow in those footsteps.
To be respectful of her choices. Be around people who are not going to pressure you into, I get where you're going.
And not going to let her slip, too. You got this sisterhood, and the Mother Superior.
I can see that.
Sure, of course.
I didn't assume that Isabelle had like a problem. Listen to me making excuses. Anyway,
no, and that's why I included you in this.
The reason I say this is because when I was at the worst point in my life, I was a very heavy drinker. And when I say that, I mean every day. And I don't just mean like a beer at the end of the day. I mean several to be drunk. The goal was to be drunk every day. I did that because I was in a bad place. And honestly, once I left that place, even when I left where I was living and I moved away at just like only like an hour and a half, I drank much, much less because all of a sudden the root of my drinking was out of my life. And so I didn't feel the need as much.
Right. You had the capacity.
To me, it was, I don't know. I guess maybe I'm just projecting, but I just assumed that was more circumstantial than it was like a problem.
Oh, no, I figured the same because I don't really feel that's the answer, but some people feel like that is part of it.
I'm sure there would have been people in my life back then that would have been like, you should go to AA. And maybe I should have at that time, but I didn't. I'm fine.
Right. There was a sense to me that was her way of, I don't know, maybe being something else for someone under her care than she was with Lily.
So
there was a little avoidance and like, let's do this right. And I get to do it from scratch.
I could see that.
So
it's like avoidance.
I saw a lot of that in this episode in particular.
I'm safe here overall. I don't have to worry about going back out into the world where I have to do that kind of thing that I was doing before.
I would 100% guess that she was hoping that Quinn would just die. I'm going to go back to something. I'm so sorry. But I want to talk about Antoine for a second.
What we do. The pigeon guy, Antoine.
Okay. When we saw him in the first episode that we saw him, which was the last one, through episode 3, I remember thinking like, I recognize this guy and I couldn't place why. And I would just be remiss if I didn't acknowledge what it was, because it was a really big part of my life. People of the same age probably had this as a big part of their lives, or maybe they didn't love it as much as I did, but I really did. My favorite movie in high school, Dawn of the Dead, has always been like one of my favorite movies. But when I was in high school, I fell in love with a French film. And I watched it again and again and again and again. And it was called Amélie. And Antoine was one of the actors. I was just over the moon about this movie. I just thought it was the most beautiful love story. I was obsessed with it.
Well, because it was so strange and atypical.
Yes, too. It's a very unusual movie. And it's about like a quirky love. And she's
You really like the oysters of the chicken. Do you remember? This is like the one thing that stood out to me. Yes. It was the best part of the chicken.
It's the best part of the chicken. I still think about that when I eat chicken off the bone. Right? I still think about that. It's in my mind forever.
His name is Dominique Pignon.
So he played Joseph in the movie. He ends up with the little waitress.
Yeah.
Who can't find
the
love.
The hypochondriac waitress, right? Yeah. Waitress, not weightless.
Who can't find love. It's a very sweet movie if you've never seen it.
Such a hypochondriac.
Yeah, if you've never seen it, I highly recommend it. It's very unusual. Yeah, it was done by a pair of brothers. The main character, she became famous in America for doing that really bad Dan Brown Angels and Demons movie.
Oh yes, that's right.
She was Tom Hanks' counterpart, and it was awkward because she's so much younger than Tom Hanks. Anyway, it just was really uncomfortable.
She looked familiar.
So what they do is they film the movie on film, and then they go back over the film and hyper saturate it with color.
It's a lot like what people used to do with Technicolor.
Yes. So it gives this really unusual feel to the film. So all the colors are like deeply saturated. Visually, it's beautiful. It's stunning. And it tells a really unusual, quirky love story that had 16-year-old Bridget just smitten with the idea of love, real love.
Something strange like this for me.
Yeah, and she didn't know at the time, but it was going to take a while.
I own that film. That's how big it was for an impact it had on me too. That film could be this way.
It caused
could be
me
artistic,
to
funny.
Caused me to look into other French films, which I wouldn't have done otherwise as like a teen. Love Me If You Dare, and other movies along those lines.
Since we're darting around, we should go to the beginning. We're talking about the dream sequence. And obviously in the last episode, Daryl falls to the floor. And we start in this episode with completely reasonable scenario where Daryl is in some sort of labyrinthian basement cellar area of a place. There's a gate with a lock, an old timey lock on it. And Laurent's on the other side. He's having this dream sequence and he wakes up. I kind of want to talk about what you think it means, because I think there is something to it. I'm not saying like, oh, this means this is going to happen, which we usually do. But I'm saying dreams tell you a lot about deep-seated fears or feelings.
I feel like they've been shoving all this. He is the Messiah. He's everything. He's gonna make it all better. They're shoving it all in his head so much that possibly subconsciously he is wondering if there is something more to Laurent. Maybe not what the nuns are thinking, but something.
Something, but to be fair, he's actively calling out to Laurent. He's just trying to, right? So he's acting as if, like we said about Isaiah's prayer too.
He's calling out for Laurent.
Laurent.
Like
Laurent.
No,
call him Larry. Call him Lawrence.
If somebody
like
was out there screaming, "Hey, Sharandy," I don't know if I'd be like responding either. I'd be like, "Get it right, fool." Laurent, he's heard it say Laurent a million times. It's Laurent. No,
Laurent.
I wouldn't respond either.
Actually, he called him Laurent. Laurent.
That's even worse. Maybe it's Daryl's subconscious starting to believe that he might be something special and it's not just a bunch of bull hockey. Maybe this kid really is something special, and that's what's going on in his subconscious, drowning in unconscious mind.
I'm watching Bridget right now.
Yeah.
She's like, this.
No, I think it's interesting to hear what you guys think about it. I think it's interesting.
I'm not saying that's what's really happening. I'm saying that's
Obviously.
Daryl's mind accepting that it might be something special. He might be something special.
I wrote that
I'm not
he
saying
wants
that's where
to
they're
believe.
going.
My interpretation of that, well, one, when I first watched it, I was like, what?
Same. I'm like thinking of Bridget the entire time.
What is happening?
Like,
There's that one walker when he's yelling that the walker like turns and looks at him and then like immediately turns away like, what? and goes back to Laurent, which cracked me up.
No, the walker
puts his arm around
the
Laurent.
walker's like, who's Laurent?
Who's Laurent? I don't know, some dude.
I don't know. That was really funny to me. That part really cracked me up. There were a lot of walkers looking towards the camera in this episode, like more than normal, which again was like kind of like jarring.
As soon as Laurent walked into the hallway, I was like, this is a dream.
I'm glad you knew, because it was driving me insane.
There's no way that Daryl fell down into this area, and that's exactly where
he
Laurent
is.
Yeah, no, it's a dream.
So I did think, in terms of like, is this showcasing fear or whatever? There's a part of Daryl that's fearful that he can't help Laurent, or he'll end up being put in a situation in which he can't help him. But this could also be a fear of like, what if they're right? And there is something to this kid. God is real, and I haven't believed any of it. Like, wouldn't that be like terrifying?
Meaning you or meaning Daryl?
No, Daryl. Like, wouldn't that be terrifying?
Okay.
Like, I believe in God.
But Bridget,
I'm
clearly
good.
you don't believe enough. It's
I'm
fine.
good, but I'm all good. But I could see
you don't want this kid to be the Messiah.
No,
so
I do not.
Made clearly. So then believe a little longer.
I don't.
I think the saying is there are no atheists in rooftop holes or something like that.
And foxhole, yeah, that's from World War II.
In rooftop holes.
Interesting.
I like that. That's good. It's very acclamable. It's so weird that it's so specific. If I didn't and then had something like affirm it so wholeheartedly, I don't mean fear isn't like, it's not like scared fear. There's a different kind of fear when you talk about something so much bigger than you. It's the same kind of fear that you get, Rachel, middle of the ocean. Right? Okay. It's not so much. It's the same thing for me. It's not like I am fearful of water. That's not what it is. It's that you're so small. Right? That's the fear.
Surrounded by that vastness.
So same thing when I go to the Science Museum and I see the whale skeleton. Every time it shakes me to my core internally. How is something this big? Something about it just really terrifies me. But it's not that I'm afraid of whales, because I'm not. But there's something about knowing that you're so tiny in the world. And I'm not talking like scared fear. I'm talking awe, reverence.
Okay, see, that's, you finally said the word I was ready to tee up and say.
Yeah.
Awe. Awe is the right word. In Hebrew, there's many words for fear, but that particular word is a type of awe. There are elements in that word of feeling small, feeling minuscule, but also feeling not the weight, but an overwhelming presence of what once was, now I know better. It's kind of like what people describe psychedelics, LSD, that all of a sudden your mind opens up to so many more possibilities that you didn't think of before. And of course, you're filled with such awe but also like a better understanding of the world, that it opens up, it unlocks something in your mind, mind altering.
There's a Ben Folds song about that where he talks about this guy that had a really bad trip. He went and climbed up a tree. When he came back down, he was a Christian. It's like
it's very on brand
by Ben Folds. It's like a story from when he was growing up. He grew up here in North Carolina, actually. The mind altering, so it does something to you. And if you open your eyes and you saw everything there was to see in the universe, that's what it did for him.
The one other thing that I wanted to touch on that seems obvious, but I don't think it is. For all the saying that my job here is done in the last episode when they were at Falu's camp, it was like, oh, this guy can't get me the radio and the pigeons and my job here is done. That guy can take you to the nest. Sayonara. When this episode opens up, you have to keep in mind, he falls through the roof just after having this falling out with Isabelle. And of course they make up later on. But in this moment, they're still in the aftermath of that argument. I think in this dream sequence, he's also admitting that he cares more about Laurent and his fate and making sure that he fulfills whatever it is, even if it's a fairy tale, even if nothing comes of it. He is, contrary to what he says to Isabelle, that he is invested and he cares more about him than he cares to admit also. And it seems obvious, but it really isn't. You intrinsically know Daryl and that he can't leave a situation unresolved, even though sometimes we say, okay, he's not going to white knight her, but he's sure as hell going to give whoever it is that's in trouble enough of the tools to be able to dig themselves out. Or failing that, if they slip and they may really hurt themselves, he will come in and save the day. We know that. But with regards to this kid, there may be some people that be like, okay, Daryl, get out of what? Who cares? Daryl, go home. That's where we want you. We want you to be with the people we saw on the TV for the last decade plus. There are people like that. So when you have a scene like this, of these deep-seated feelings, this informs the audience, dude, he cares about him more than he cares to admit. And it's supposed to tell the audience he's invested. He's not going to leave the situation unresolved, at the very least. I like film craft in that sense because you think that scene, and really, this scene does not have to be here. It screws with our heads a little bit because of his dream suit, and I was a little mad at it at first. Also, but it's very informative of Daryl's feeling, which is something that we don't get. Daryl says very few words. So when we get to see this full color picture of what it's like to be in his head, pay attention. That's his feelings. Even if he says something, there's a whole ocean of nothing behind it, and he's really not thinking of anything. But when we look at Daryl, we're thinking he's thinking of something. I may not know what it is, but he's thinking. And this is one of those things. I also thought of something else, though, and more when we were talking than rather in my notes. And I thought there was a distinct two tiny, tiny nuggets that I want to see if you felt something of that. And that is when he sees Laurent walking away with the walkers. I saw two things. I saw maybe he feels like he needs to be needed, even if he knows he shouldn't be in that scenario. I think he feels like in some ways he needs to be needed, but also that I think in some ways he wants to be involved with this in this kid's life, and that he may fear that at some point he won't get to be, or that he might be pushed away in some sense. It's out of your hands now, Daryl. You have to let Laurent go. Foreshadowing, maybe even.
Do you feel like he sees Laurent as a sort of stand-in for Judith?
I was going there. I was going to say that you're reminding me of the conversation we had earlier about, oh, that's not Daryl torturing people because Daryl's soft. Daryl's only softened because he's a dad. Whether they're his kids or not, he's a dad. He's been a dad, and it was for a good long while, and that's going to change most people. Now, I feel like that part of him is what Laurent is appealing to, or maybe the wanting the relationship with Laurent is just coming from that dad part of him that is missing Judith and RJ.
Which is what you meant, Charity, by him being a stand-in for Judith, that maybe he misses her in a sense.
He knows Judith is special, like not Messiah special. So why couldn't Laurent also be special in his own way? If I can help him, I'm by extension helping Judith, even though I'm not there.
So take the next step. So what does it mean that he can't, though? And these are just his feelings. Keep that in mind.
It's this world, man. He can't help everybody. They have to eventually learn how to fly on their own.
He's only one man.
Just like Judith. She was a pretty independent little thing. Laurent is also the opposite of Judith, because Judith has been taught since she was old enough to stand up how to be a fighter and how to fight. And Laurent has been kept secluded and away from any danger at all. So he is like the flip side of Judith. Maybe she doesn't really need my help anymore. She's always going to need me, but maybe she doesn't need my help anymore. But now Laurent does.
Or that level of help, right?
Laurent does.
Kinda like
he
Isabelle,
has no
too.
survival skills whatsoever.
Yet still, there may be a point where even if he doesn't have all the skills he needs, he might not be able or might not be allowed to see that through.
But that's inevitable because he's going home.
Well, I don't know. Second season, who knows what that's going to be?
I mean, that's true,
right?
yeah.
You know what? I'm happy with just that question hanging, actually, because that gives you something to think about after the episode. Are we sure that he's going to go home right away?
Right.
Season 2, they're going to cross over into Africa and have a whole different set of adventures. They're going to go on safari.
They're going to make action figures with
Daryl. It's going to be a whole different ball game going to Africa.
I could see Daryl in the Bedouin people with like a whole thing. Oh, can't you see it? It's glorious. No?
Daryl of Arabia.
Daryl of Arabia. I'm in.
Oh my gosh.
Ride with.
I am going to go Photoshop that right now.
Ride with Ritas. Yeah, sure.
I want to move forward only one scene where he actually wakes up in the water. Am I he got bit, right? We all saw that walker chomp on his ankle.
Was his boot?
It was his boot.
And then
Yep, all yups. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. It's a yup.
when he was like swimming up, he stabbed the thing in the head, and we see the blood come from the walker's head, and then he like floats down. Right, walker's dead, and then Daryl is swimming up. I swear, I saw like a stream of blood coming from his pant leg, not the walker's head.
So I didn't see that, but again, I had to rewind, freeze frame, do it all.
And like once he got out of the water, he didn't look at the boot, like he didn't check to like see, like there was no attention drawn to this whatsoever. So the whole episode I kept waiting for something, and I'm like, oh shit, Daryl's gonna lose his leg.
You want to know what made it worse?
Add it to the pile of limbs.
You and me are on the same page, right? Okay. but Antoine, he says, "Are you okay?" And he go, "Or no, I can't believe you're alive." Most sort of.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
So
sort of.
And leave it to Daryl to not check, because he'd be like, "Oh yeah, okay, I'm done." Right? Because you'd think, right? Because this is how he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm bit, so this is what's gonna happen."
I was just reminded of Jerry in the cave. There was blood and stuff on his shoes too, but it came from the walker's mouths trying to bite to get through, not necessarily them biting his skin.
10, my nightmare episode. K. That's the worst episode of all time.
Oh my gosh. When they first announced the Daryl show and it was going to be Daryl and Carol, and we were joking about, well, maybe Daryl will be a walker and Carol will be walking him around. So maybe that's what's going to happen.
Oh man, I hate this added component of the cure, and then he's better.
All it made me think of
course I was thinking that.
This is why your boy always has his pants tied.
And like the boots over the thing, and
because people are always like, why does he have that? Like, I've responded to it on a Reddit post before, and one, live in the South and then go in the woods and then tell me that you won't do this, because you will.
Right. You also need like a bandana for pooping, so you take it off and just use it for
maybe.
Pooping.
There's snakes. There are all sorts of critters, and there's tons of bugs, and there's
some mozzies,
poison ivy and poison oak, and there are lots of reasons that you want no part of your skin exposed on the lower half of your body. So came in handy.
Yep. Valid. But wait, so Bridget, did you not have a little bit of a freak out when you saw that bite?
No.
I didn't.
I was like, it bit his God. I was like, wait, it must have been his boot. That was like all I thought. I was like, oh,
Jerry in the cave. Move on. That's what I was thinking.
That's about it for that. Thanks, Antoine. Thanks, Daryl. Because here's the thing, okay? Because they could, and just like the Isabelle and Daryl with the thing, they could decide to flip the script and go, oh, no, he was bitten. Oh, wah. I don't know.
Daryl knows by now. Like, no, I don't think he did get bit. It just was like shocking to me that we just sort of like glossed right over. Like, we're not even going to check. We're not going to like, we saw this happen and we're just going to move on like it didn't happen. And I know he didn't actually get bit because Daryl knows by now, if you did, you'd be chopping that off. Like, chop it off.
See, I thought about that too. And I thought, is Daryl the kind of person that would be that would just walk it off or would take care of business? And
he would complete the task at hand, because to him, the task at hand, well, it depends. But because this is about saving Laurent, that would be worth more than his life. to him.
Yeah, but there's still that part of me that thinks he would just power through. Like
Daryl's the cure. That's what we're gonna find out.
No, but Daryl would be is stubborn
not Laurent,
too.
It's Daryl, and it's the cure is being stubborn.
I know. We always thought it was Rick in the back of our minds. Like, oh, Rick is A, the start of the virus, and B, the cure.
I can't help Laurent if I have one leg, so I need to make sure that I help him first with these 2 legs before I figure out if I was bitten.
Right. Well, he also can't help Laurent if he dies.
Right.
And it's unpredictable when you're gonna like die in turn. I think if he did get bit, he'd have chopped it off and figured it out.
I think what bothers us most is that he really didn't check, not really, and that's
right.
what bothers me the most.
Yeah.
Because if he did, and that would have been it, and he would have known, and he could be like, okay, I'm powering through, or it's time to chop off that leg. Whatever. I just hate that it's in there to begin with.
Yeah, like why even put it in there?
You know why they did it? Because Norman Reedus watches the show, and we were making fun of him a lot for saying, oh, no way. And then he said, let's fuck with these guys. Post, because he traveled back in time to add that scene or whatever.
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah, sure.
That's what he did.
Okay.
I'm a fucking asshole. Love you. My only takeaway from the scene with Janae and Quinn is really the things she says to get him to exchange Daryl. And they may seem dumb, whatever. Like weapons is dumb. I don't have anything for that. But she offers arms. She offers 20 bushels of corn, which, of course, you're thinking, okay, it's probably a throwaway line.
To make alcohol.
For me, it was like, but you don't make that leap. Or you could, and you could throw it away. But 20 bushels of corn is a specific reference to what may be William Faulkner's short story called Barn Burning, wherein, just to give you a picture of what this is about, it's in the aftermath of the Civil War. You have tenant farmers, white tenant farmers working alongside black tenant farmers for landlords. It's like this weird kind of feudal system, etc. One of the landlords is called the Major de Spain in this story. It focuses on the Abner family, a son and a father. And the whole premise of the story is about whether he should choose between remaining loyal to his father or doing what he knows is morally right by alerting an intended victim of the crime his father is about to commit. The whole French reference comes in because the father had muddied the carpet of the landlord, the elder father of the younger Abner. And the carpet was a very expensive French carpet. And the argument that he has with the elder Abner is about, well, since you don't have $100, which was a lot of money at the time, I'll just take 20 bushels of corn from you. So the French reference comes in with the carpet and the 20 bushels of corn. So obviously, Janae was a Faulkner fan, a William Faulkner fan.
Clearly.
This feels like a bit of a stretch, Dave. This feels like a bit of a stretch.
It's the only place I could.
Everyone knows that, right?
I mean, French carpets, right? French carpets.
Anyway, I assumed it was to make alcohol.
I mean, I just like corn, so I'm like, yeah, eat that shit.
Just eat that shit. When Anna Valeri was offering truffles and he was like, I don't care. Oh, but corn, yeah. It's cool. Major American crop too, by the way. But anyway, the second thing she mentions is the, because this is very long. The Faulkner one was the long one.
He wants the painting.
Calvados is a select apple cider that's made from a particular breed of apples. Very expensive. But it also refers to one of the 83 departments in the French Revolution as well. So it's a very interesting tie to French history. It's a part of the department in the French Revolution that was formerly the province of Normandy too, which was a whole big thing in World War II. But what he does want instead is Monet's Japanese footbridge.
The significance of the Monet thing. Monet is significant as an artist, especially to the Impressionism movement, but maybe Isabelle enjoys Monet is what I felt like that came from.
Well, she was admiring water lilies.
Because she admired it. Yeah, she admired it when it was there. Then I felt like after that fact, then he was like, I've heard you have another Monet and I want that one because I want to have these things to try to.
Monets. How about a Monet in your Monet on your Monet?
These are all from the Water Lilies series that Monet did later in his life.
Right. That particular one was meant to illustrate the harmony between humanity and nature, painted at the dawn of major industrialization, reminding us to look at the flowers. That was me ad-libbing the facts. But it was the whole idea of as we industrialize, as we put in skyscrapers and factories and smoky things that cloud the atmosphere, and cars and stuff like that. It was his way of, because the Japanese footbridge is muted while the lilies are popping. And the whole idea was to admire nature while we have it. We may not. and to be in harmony with nature, humanity and nature in harmony. That was that whole point of the piece. But yes, Impressionism is important because what Janae says.
Let's not forget her sister's name is Lily.
Yes, I think that has something to do with why Isabelle enjoys Monet paintings. But Janae says something about it being like degenerate art.
Degenerate.
Okay. I wanted to talk about that because that's an interesting concept. I haven't heard anything said about Impressionism like that in a really long time, maybe ever. But I get where that comes from because that's very much what would have been said about Impressionism at the time of its creation. Monet came from an era in which everyone learned how to paint the same way. You studied a still life or a person and you made a portrait. And that was it.
Like Rembrandt.
And everything was meant to look realistic. It was all about realism. Those were the masters of art, were these painters that did these realistic paintings. Well, everything started to look the same. Muted tones and either a portrait of a person or a still life of some books on a table with some fruit. It's like why when we think of still life, you think of like the same image. Fruit, books, flowers. Fruit, books, flowers, like in some array.
People in a scene.
All in,
Gross.
Yeah. So Monet and other like-minded artists, Renoir, which brings me back to Amelie, because he plays a big part in Amelie. But anyway. Those who get it, get
As Dave
it.
elbows Bridget has to say it for the podcast.
So Monet came from a time period in which they were trying to break free of this idea. Early Monet paintings are done in the same style, the same realism style, because this is how he was taught to paint. This was also a time period in which, much like today, being an artist is frowned upon because you can't make any money that way, and the same stuff you hear nowadays with why you shouldn't be an artist because you're not going to make any money. And I believe he ended up becoming part of this movement of these young artists. They were considered the rebels of like art at the time, because what they would do is they would go out into the world and they would paint on the spot, which is like not what you did. You would sketch before and you would like be really like meticulous about what you were painting.
Methodical.
He became one of these people who painted with like fervor, and it was like fast, and you used quick, small brush strokes, and you did everything outside because you're trying to encapsulate nature in that moment. Instead of I set up this still life, the still life could be there for 4 days and it would look exactly the same. This instead, I'm trying to catch the way that the light hits the water or the way that the sun comes through the leaves on the trees. I'm trying to catch all of these things as they happen. When you look at Monet's artwork, that's why Impressionism is considered very similar, not to be confused with pointillism, but considered to be very similar, because pointillism uses dots, repeated dots, to create one piece of art when you step away from it. Impressionism,
right. It's the entire piece.
Impressionism has the same effect due to the quick brush strokes that Impressionist artists use. So when you look really close at it, you can see each individual brushstroke really rapidly having been moved across the page. But when you step back from it, you can see it as a whole picture.
You get the impression.
Yep, that's where the name comes from. It was considered like kind of sloppy at the time. Again, this wasn't how the masters were doing art. So this was like rebellion.
It's not the way that
each
it's
movement
done,
of art
Bridget.
is considered rebellion, but this was like the big rebellion that moved us forward into other things like fauvism.
Wait till you get to
which
postmodern.
Fauvism is, I believe Matisse was considered a fauvist. Fauvism is actually French for wild animal. This was like where we were leading to.
I think it's still part of the modern art movement, but not the postmodern art movement where it's just
well, then it's just
annoying.
TVs flashing and
no, that's not postmodern. Anyway, go on. Sorry. It does tie back to the episode, but
Monet and Toulouse-Lautrec that I talked about in the second episode were contemporaries in France.
Yes. I teach art history to very small children who don't always understand what I'm saying, but that's okay because exposure is education in its own right.
It applies here too. Sure. So the term that Janae uses, Impressionism is degenerate art, is a term that was used by the Nazi Party. And it was called Enthalte Kunst to describe modern art. And it was generally an insult to German feeling. This is what, when I read this, I'm like, wait, we're going here? We're going to, that she used the exact words?
Well, that's why she wears the jacket. She's a Nazi.
The whole eugenics, and then also the idea of like no imperfections. And
that's why she says that thing to Sonia about how people like you weak and come on.
I don't like the pattern that's this weave. This is too on the nose for me, for my liking. I'll go with it. But anyway, Impressionism was seen as a sign of a diseased visual cortex because, of course, they were very fearful. I don't know if the right word's fearful.
That's so stupid.
But to weed out imperfection from the populace. And this is not a leap. This is a pointed remark that refers to this particular moment in time. And yes, Monet and all his gang were rooted out of their works were placed next to the graffiti in the streets to illustrate how shitty their works was. Oh, this is street art. This doesn't belong in museums. And yes, thank you for going back to Sonia. But there was this moment where she picks up the child. And I did not have a sympathetic feeling for Janae, but I thought, okay, maybe am I understanding her motivations right? I know I'm jumping back and forth. We just went from Nazi party to maybe soft feelings for Janae. Yeah, I'm a Jew sympathizes with a Nazi. So
what happened?
She holds the baby. She shushes the baby. The music is belying what's happening in the scene, in my opinion. Kind of like when we see Caudon on the screen and Rachel still gets that feeling of like, but is he bad, right? Is he bad? Even though the music and everything leading up to it is like the camera angle shows that he's menacing. In your brain, you're like, am I being forced to see something that might not be there? So she coos the baby and then she hesitates, but she proceeds to hold it on her shoulder. Just embrace it. I thought to myself, I was at first, but then I thought in second watch that maybe she feels like all of this is super exhausting after 12 years and that this baby reminds her of what she's fighting for. Just like Isabelle with Laurent and him being who he is. I mean, that's got to be exhausting too, having to be the caretaker of the Messiah too. I saw a little bit of symmetry there. I also saw a little bit of like an entry point for sympathy for Janae because like Caudron and like the experiments that we saw in the last episode, well, what if her whole thing is to rid these things from humanity, the walkers, and she's been working very hard. And the burners were a terrible, terrible mistake, as well as the end scene in The Walking Dead World Beyond, probably, maybe. But then it just must be weighing after making mistake after mistake after mistake with these things for the last 12 years. This baby is a reminder of what we're fighting for, maybe. I saw like a softness, just a little, just enough throughout the Nazi stuff.
I was terrified the whole time she was going to kill that baby.
Me too.
I was like, oh my God. I was having like MASH finale flashbacks. But then when she didn't kill the baby, which I thought for sure was what she was going to do, then I was like, okay, she's going to take this kid and
oh yeah, I thought that too. A little
put
bit.
it in, raise it up in their army or whatever. Like, there's no way that mom's getting the kid back either way. I don't even like kids, and I was worried about that.
Right, exactly. Well, yeah, we know the clip, right? Oh, kids, we need kids, but kill them anyway. So that's
done.
We shall not talk about it. But you may not have noticed that in that scene, as you're watching it, terrified, everybody in that scene, all eyes were on Janae. Also terrified, like a Monet painting, right? Like pointillism. If you look close enough, you can see the eyes of terror on this woman with this child. From a distance, there's this big tense blob that makes you tense. So it's just very interesting to note that even Caudon is looking at her too, and for all the feelings we may or may not have about him, he was kind of like, just like in the last episode, looking at the experiment. He was like, okay, what did I sign up for again? The face tattoo? I just wanted the face tattoo. I didn't really sign up for this. Her own men are looking at her and they're like, I had my doubts. But all right. Anyway, but nothing happened. And I just thought this, of course, after the shock fades, you watch it again, if you're lucky, not like us all the time. And I got this thought. I had this feeling, this thought that maybe you in the audience might have seen as well. That maybe you got something out of it as well.
I was extra nervous because the woman was like standing up to her and really telling her what she thought about her.
Sonia did not give
she I was like, oh my goodness.
Okay, I have a quick question. When they're at the tower and Quinn's men take Laurent, is he holding on to the headrest in the car?
Laurent?
It seemed like he wasn't like, Daryl's like trying to pull him and he's like, Daryl, but it looked like he was like holding on to it. And I was like, is he going with them? Is he like, no, I'm going with them?
I have a lot of feelings about that scene too.
Just get out the car.
I was really
Get
confused.
out of the car.
Well, then I thought,
Safety
does he
first.
need to go so that he can like meet his dad or whatever? Is that like part of his? Does he feel like he has to do that? I don't know. I was
Well, he called out for Daryl, but
Does
maybe there
he
was a
know
technical.
what a car is? Has he ever seen a car? Does he have any concept of what's going on?
No
That's
idea.
true.
That's a great point, Charity.
Once Laurent is in the car and Daryl catches up to him, I took that one very specific way. And I don't know if it was a choice by the actor or what. The way he says Daryl's name, I didn't hear like, save me. It was more like, Daryl, listen, like he was about to tell him something. When he was in the car, he said Daryl's name differently than when he was being carried over to the car.
Let go. I'll be okay.
Yes. Like it was more about getting Daryl's attention now instead of help me, Daryl.
Oh, maybe he felt it in his tummy.
Yeah, maybe he felt in his tummy that he knew where he was going.
I have to really admit, I had not thought about this at all. And I'm not a stubborn man to say you're wrong. But you got me
say
thinking.
it all the time.
I infer it all the time. I don't say it. Also, I am. But no, but you guys have me thinking differently about that scene. I will rewatch it and maybe think about it differently. It doesn't happen often. I'm usually right about everything, right, Rachel? But
well,
no.
because and there's a moment where Daryl does have a hold of Laurent. He's trying to pull him out, and you almost see Laurent pull back.
Interesting.
I was like, what are you doing?
Daryl's walking up the stairs. I think this is right after he gets out of the roof and all that stuff. And I found this scene very interesting and also a little odd. The cellist who's playing Johann Sebastian Bach's Cello Suite 1.
Mm-hmm.
The, you know, do 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 do. Okay. And then the old couple. I want to know what you guys thought of that scene because it is odd, right? You don't think that in this world of communities and whatever, but also Paris being Paris. For us, it's a little bit of a culture shock, but what did you get out of that scene?
It reminded me of World Beyond. The beginning of World Beyond was really jarring. Well, she goes to the housing to see her therapist. Iris does.
Dr. K.
And it's like really jarring because they like live in their own apartments. So to me, that's what it reminded me of was like, oh, they're living in their own apartments and they're like continuing their lives and like people are still living and like enjoying life.
Outside this
what
drama.
A concept. Literally, this is the ultimate YOLO. Our people are constantly like, we're fighting for what's right. And finally we see people that are like, nah, bro, I'm good. I'm going to enjoy life.
So my question is, we're in a big city and it has been 12 years or so, but where are all of the dead? Because there aren't a whole lot for being in a big city, right?
They still have these like militant type groups walking around that I think are probably taking care of whatever they come across when they're traveling.
Especially if they were there from the start too.
Mm-hmm.
Pouvoir de vivant. And of course, movements change. They didn't immediately embrace Nazism. Maybe they had well intentions and they cleaned up most of the city. And maybe going to your point, Charity, maybe part of that barricade at the Eiffel Tower was made by them and they put a whole bunch of them behind there or something or other. I don't know. Why not put them down? Maybe they believe the same thing as Isabelle.
You have this couple that's just sitting in their apartment having dinner in the windows. But do you feel like you would see that in Atlanta if you went back there now? So what is the difference between Paris and, I don't know, Cincinnati or whatever? Like, what is, why can these people...
Selfish.
So I was sort of thinking that in response to you as well, Sharon D, that it does maybe dovetail into individualism versus the common good, or what the French saying, which is liberté, fraternité. Like part of the whole slogan is fraternity, is brotherhood.
Okay, this is like a nice belief to believe that people would like be there for each other, but like ultimately,
I don't believe that
humans
that's the case.
are horrible ultimately, and were you guys doing this during COVID? Was France different than America? It was horrible here. People were fighting over toilet paper. Were you not fighting over toilet paper over there?
Here's where my statement comes from. So the American militaries, in my opinion, would be more worried about going to take care of their families than actually stay in a military where these guys out in France are actually militarizing themselves. I don't think that they're going around and killing walkers to make the city better, but I think if they come across them, they're going to take them out. Why leave that threat, if that makes sense?
But what leads you to believe that the military that we have would not stay where they were? What leads you to believe that they would be selfishly motivated?
I don't think it's selfish to worry about your family, but I do think that are more selfish overall because of the individualism that we're taught.
I don't think that's true at all. I think people are horrible across the world. I don't think it matters where you live. I think no matter what.
Where I stand on that.
Do you think they bombed Paris like we bombed Atlanta and other cities?
I don't think so.
Nope.
Do you think maybe that?
I don't get that sense.
I'm not sure how that would make a difference, but do you think that made a difference? Do you think they bombed the big cities in Europe and stuff like that like they did in America?
I don't get the sense that they did. What do you guys think?
I don't think so either, because otherwise your people all would have left the city. People aren't in Atlanta because people didn't stay in Atlanta, because the people that did stay in Atlanta are dead. Well, they're undead.
Okay, well, let's look at American criminals, or whatever you want to call them in the Walking Dead universe, right? These people have been allowed to live in their apartments. They don't have to worry about who's going to come break their apartment down and shoot them in the face and steal all their crap. In France, I could not see that happening, like you said, in Atlanta.
Okay, but I'm saying, like, this is not real. This is television. So I'm just saying, like, these are stereotypes that are built up. That I'm saying, like, people are horrible no matter where you are. I think that's a dream, and I think that when people say stuff like that, it really irks me.
I can tell you France has a serious racial problem.
You're saying now, or you're saying
now.
in this show?
No, now, in reality.
Okay. They have a lot of problems. And some of those problems exacerbate racial tensions,
So what I'm saying is, like, while this is nice, like this idea, this like this European like idea that like there's a sense of community, I'm just saying that I don't think that this is what would really happen. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay.
Why don't we take 2 steps back? And in terms of the scene, though, in what way does this inform you of the world narratively when Daryl sees this? The cellist, the old couple. Could it be things that he's wanted that these people seem to have because they're sheltering in place? I was trying to remember the exact funny term that they used. Shelter in place, 6 feet, no toilet paper. Forget about what you think it is. What did you feel when you saw Daryl see these people? All of a sudden, music.
It was really beautiful and kind of wistful. Mm-hmm. These people have managed to do this without having something like the Commonwealth around them. Or Alexandria, like they're on their own and making beautiful music and having dinner together and living like a family, and they're doing that without having authority like you have it, or even when they were at the prison, because Rick was ultimately the authority at the prison, right, for the most part. So he's seeing like this can happen without having to have someone else, without having someone else tell you what to do.
Come what may.
Right.
Pure, almost like a libertarian attitude. Okay, well, whatever happens out there is none of my business.
Don't you think that that's why they did the pan over to the dead, though? Because like it's like almost like you're like, oh, this doesn't seem like it's in this world, and then all of a sudden it's like,
yeah, is this another dream?
The apocalypse is still here. They're right there.
Yeah, but even with the walls and even with all the protections that he had at the Commonwealth, it still got busted into and overrun, and so did Alexandria, and so did the prison.
I think you could argue then that in this world, maybe America's flaw then is that we're focused on rebuilding for the future, whereas this is very much what is that? Laissez-faire.
Like I said, libertarian, laissez-faire capitalism.
Historically, royalty doesn't go over well in France. So,
but just this idea of like, do you just live your life and enjoy what you have now? The future be damned. Eat, drink, and be merry.
You mean like que sera, sera?
Yeah.
Yes.
What will be is what will be.
Yeah.
Paris sera toujours Paris. Yeah. Sure, I got that as well. The one piece that I want to go to was the actual cello piece, which is Johann Sebastian Bach's Cello Suite 1 of his cello suites. Yo-Yo Ma was doing a Riverside performance in New Zealand in 2011 after the major earthquakes that they had there. And he said the following about this piece. This piece, in some strange coded way that culture does, represents in many ways the water that is flowing right in front of us, the riverside that he was playing in front of. It also represents when something very violent and tragic interpreted the flow. Debris, or chunks of debris, or waste, or whatever, things that interrupt the flow of that river. This piece also includes the rebuilding and the reimagining of the better version of the very first. Obviously, I'll include the link to this article in the blog, but I just thought that was a very interesting thing as a companion to watching this scene, that maybe these people are making it better than the first, that yes, they can live life the way they wish to live it without forming big groups and factions and messiahs and authority and Nazis, that maybe they could live in this world the way they wish to. And in doing so, make it better. And that maybe it's not about selfishness and whatnot, but maybe, oh yeah, they can help more people than they did before. Maybe they could be more neighborly or friendly or whatnot. That maybe like any of us would see a zombie apocalypse, I can be my better self. Because that's us. When we're watching the show, we idealize ourselves, right, Bridget?
Yes.
Even though you acknowledge that people are horrible,
yes.
but you yourself, but not me. God-fearing me, but in spite of ourselves, then maybe we could be and make it better.
Well, just because I say people are horrible doesn't mean I don't have eternal optimism and hope.
I know, that's why I said that.
I know. It's contradiction. It's a contradiction. It's fine.
I learn a lot from you, though.
I agree with Bridget. People are horrible.
Mm-hmm. I know that you do.
It falls into my faith, though. That's where that comes from, Dave.
Yeah. But this one,
I've said this on numerous occasions.
Yeah. I have you on the left and I have Bridget on the right, extreme left, extreme right, but you're saying the same thing. And Takira can't get away fast enough in the middle of the screen.
There are exceptions.
We all try to, I'm talking about us here, all try to be good people, but you can't always be the best person.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes shit happens and you snap and things go wrong. But that doesn't mean you're not a good person. You just are a human.
I also spend most of my time listening to murder podcasts, so all I hear about are monsters.
Horrible monsters.
I listen to history podcasts, so it's not that much different.
So not too far different.
Not that much different. But the thing is, there are some people out there that don't try to be good people, that are just all around terrible.
Yes.
But there are a lot of people out there that try to be good people, and sometimes just happens. And just try to be patient and be the best person you can be. Try to be as nice and kind as you can, and be the anti-Karen.
I didn't mean to be like, you guys are all horrible. Like, that's not what I was saying.
No, I mean, I know.
That's not what I was saying. I was just, human nature is to be
totally
selfish.
know that, but you're human. We can't help what our nature is, but you can do the best you can to not be that person.
Isabelle sacrifices herself yet again so that she can get Quinn to get pouvoir de vivant to give Laurent a clear path to the nest. But Janae wants the boy too. This is something that she doesn't know. Quinn wants the boy because it's the only way she'll stay, in my opinion. So either way, they both want the kid. And what Isabelle says to Daryl about her, don't worry, I'll come back when the boy is safe, when Laurent is safe. That's not ever going to be true if this thing plays out. They're both gunning for the boy to bring him back. And even if the boy makes it safe, Quinn is going to make it so he can bring the boy, because he knows that if he does not have control over the boy, he does not have control over Isabelle. To me, Isabelle's logic, and I know that you're sort of thinking this way too, but you don't know what it is. To me, Isabelle's logic doesn't land with me. She feels that she has to do this in order to give him the best chance. So I can accept that.
But she's wrong.
Yeah,
I think we all agree that.
But she can be wrong and it not be perfectly fitting for her character to do because of her experiences and what life has told her, what one must do in order to appease whatever higher power is currently the authority over her, whether it's God, or whether it's Quinn, etc. That's really all I wanted to say, just to kind of button that up, because I felt like we went all over the place a little bit, because between the romance and just we kind of flew from that part to the other part, and but maybe it's like Carol. Like, okay, everybody calm down. It's fine. And with that, everybody, if you like what you heard, head over to ratethispodcast.com/Squawking Dead. 5 stars in an aubergine is all we need to know that you love us. But tell us what you like. Tell us what you didn't like. Tell us what we know we might have missed. But remember to tell us after every episode. And if you really like what we're doing and you want to be a part of these recording sessions in the real-time chat, well, it's free to follow us on either Ko-fi or Patreon. And it's also free to attend these recording sessions. The only thing is that we only post our recording sessions on ko-fi.com/Squawking Dead and patreon.com/Squawking Dead. And if you really feel like you think that we're doing a good job, well, you can tip us on Ko-fi and you'll get access to our unedited episode recordings. It's a little perk that you get when you tip us. And if you decide to join a membership tier on either Ko-fi or Patreon, you'll get immediate access to our Discord for only $1, as well as a whole host of other things in the Ko-fi shop. And of course, Patreon just introduced shops, so I'm going to have to spend time filling that effort up. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful journey. I find the complexity of even this fast-moving episode. I know that we had feelings about where this might go, but I like where we are. I like that we're even moving faster than we did in the last episode, and I hope that you did too. With that, can't wait to break down the next episode next week. Hopefully, you'll join us both in the chat or in the audience as we premiere or enjoying it on your audio podcast ear bosoms. Because that's not a thing. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Ear bosoms.
Bye.
Bye.